She didn't know he was behind her. Or at least, that's what he thought. Every night, after cleaning offices she would never be able to afford, Maria walked out at exactly 9:17 p.m. Not 9:16. Not 9:18. Always the same. And a man who built his life on patterns noticed. Daniel Reeves had everything: power, money, control. But there was one thing he couldn't explain. Why a single mother working the lowest job in his company moved like she was hiding something. So one night, he broke his own rules. He followed her. And what he saw that night wasn't just unexpected. It forced him to question everything he believed about people, about struggle, and about himself. Because this wasn't just a woman trying to survive. She was protecting something. Something she didn't want anyone to see. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Maria never rushed. That was the first thing Daniel noticed long before he ever stepped outside to follow her. No matter how busy the day had been, no matter how many offices were left untouched when others clocked out, she moved with a steady rhythm. Careful, deliberate, precise. Like every action mattered. Like every second counted for something beyond the paycheck she received at the end of the week. She avoided conversations, not rudely, but with a quiet distance that made people stop trying after a while. To most employees, she blended into the background. Another uniform, another routine, another name that passed through the company unnoticed. But Daniel didn't see people that way. He saw patterns, inconsistencies, details others ignored. And Maria was full of them. She never accepted overtime, even when it was offered during peak weeks when the company needed extra hands. She never stayed a minute past her usual time, even when finishing early would have been easier than leaving work incomplete. And every night, just before she left, she checked her phone in a way that didn't look casual. It looked necessary, urgent, like whatever was on that screen dictated everything else in her life. Daniel told himself it was none of his business, that people had private lives for a reason. But something about her didn't sit right with him. Not in a suspicious way, in a way that felt unfinished. Like a story missing its beginning. Daniel Reeves had built his company by trusting instinct over comfort. He had walked away from deals that looked perfect on paper because something felt off. He had cut ties with people who smiled too easily and spoke too carefully. That instinct had made him successful. It had made him respected. And over time, it had also made him distant. Relationships became transactions. Conversations became strategies. Even his own family had slowly become something he kept at arm's length. There was a time when that didn't feel like a loss. It felt like discipline, control. But control comes with a cost, and Daniel had paid it without realizing what he was giving up in return. The night he followed Maria didn't feel like a big decision at the time. It felt small, almost insignificant. She left earlier than usual, her movements sharper, her attention locked on her phone. That alone was enough to trigger something in him. Not concern. Not yet. Curiosity. The kind that doesn't fade once it starts. He watched her step out of the building, disappear into the crowd, and for a brief moment, he hesitated. Then he moved. He told himself it was harmless. That he would follow her for a few minutes, confirm that everything was normal, and return to his life. But the moment he stepped outside, he had already gone further than he intended. Maria didn't take the path Daniel expected. She didn't head toward any of the neighborhoods that matched what he assumed her life looked like. Instead, she walked several blocks past well-lit streets and familiar storefronts, into parts of the city that felt quieter, more worn. She boarded a bus without hesitation, taking a seat near the back, her eyes fixed forward. Daniel followed at a distance, blending into the background for the first time in years. For a man used to being noticed, it was an unfamiliar position. And as the bus moved through the city, the distance between his world and hers became impossible to ignore. When she finally got off, the surroundings had changed completely. The buildings were older, the sidewalks uneven, the energy slower. Maria walked quickly now, her earlier calm replaced by something closer to urgency. She reached a building that didn't match the image Daniel had unknowingly created in his mind. It wasn't just modest. It was struggling. The kind of place people passed without looking twice. She paused briefly at the entrance, glanced around, and then went inside. Daniel stopped across the street, his thoughts catching up with him all at once. This wasn't curiosity anymore. This was intrusion. And yet, he didn't leave. Inside, the hallway felt narrow, the air heavy with a quiet that carried more than silence. Daniel moved carefully, listening, searching for any sign of where she had gone. That's when he heard it. A faint sound. Soft, uneven, human. He followed it without thinking, stopping at a door that was slightly open. Light spilled into the hallway, cutting through the dimness. He looked inside. The room was small, worn, barely holding together. But it wasn't the condition that held his attention. It was what was inside. A bed, a machine, tubes, and Maria, kneeling beside it, her entire focus on the small figure lying there. A child, still, pale, connected to something Daniel didn't fully understand but immediately recognized as necessary. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't minor. This was serious. Maria reached for the child's hand, her movements gentle, practiced. She spoke softly, her voice steady but carrying a weight that didn't need explanation. Daniel stepped back, his chest tightening in a way he hadn't experienced in years. Everything made sense now, and at the same time, nothing did. The urgency, the exact timing, the refusal to stay late, the constant attention to her phone. It all pointed back to this room, this child, this fragile balance she had been maintaining alone. But if that was the truth, then there was still a question left unanswered. Why hide it so carefully? Why live like this without asking for help? Daniel left that night with more questions than answers, but one thing had changed. He could no longer pretend Maria was just another employee. Over the next few days, Daniel tried to return to his routine, but the image of that room followed him everywhere. Meetings felt less important. Numbers felt less urgent. He found himself watching Maria again, but this time, not as a puzzle to solve, as a person trying to survive something most people would never understand. He started looking into her background, not to expose her, but to understand how someone ended up carrying that much alone. What he found was incomplete. Records that didn't line up. Addresses that led nowhere. It was as if Maria had intentionally stepped away from systems that tracked people's lives. Not to disappear, but to stay out of reach. That raised a new possibility. Not just that she was protecting her child, but that she might also be protecting herself. And that thought shifted everything again. Because if Maria was hiding from something, then whatever she was dealing with went deeper than financial struggle or medical hardship. It meant there was a past she wasn't willing to risk bringing into the present. And Daniel, whether he realized it or not, was getting closer to it. One evening, as Maria prepared to leave, she paused near the exit longer than usual. She didn't look at him directly, but her posture changed slightly, as if she was aware of something. Daniel felt it immediately, that quiet sense of being noticed without being seen. He didn't move. Neither did she. And then, without turning around, she spoke softly, just loud enough for him to hear. "You don't have to follow me tonight." The words landed heavier than anything he had expected. Daniel stood still, his mind catching up with what had just happened. She knew, not just about that night, but about the nights before it, about the distance he kept, about the attention he thought he had hidden. Maria turned slightly, not enough to face him completely, but enough to make it clear she wasn't guessing. "I noticed the first time," she said quietly. "You're not as invisible as you think." There was no anger in her voice, no fear, just honesty, and something else. Weariness, the kind that comes from carrying too much for too long. Daniel stepped forward, not sure what he was going to say, but knowing he couldn't stay silent. "I wasn't trying to," he started, but the words felt incomplete before he even finished them. "I know," Maria replied. "People like you don't usually try. They just watch." There was no accusation in it, just a statement of fact. And for the first time in a long time, Daniel didn't have a response ready. Because she was right. "I didn't stop you," she continued after a moment. "I could have. I would have. But I didn't." Daniel looked at her then. Really looked at her, trying to understand what she was saying beneath the words. "Why?" he asked. Maria hesitated, not because she didn't have an answer, but because saying it out loud meant accepting something she had spent a long time avoiding. "Because sometimes," she said slowly, "being seen is the only chance you have left." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of everything neither of them had said yet. The struggle, the fear, the quiet decisions that led them both to this moment from completely different directions. Daniel felt something shift again, deeper this time. Not curiosity, not control, responsibility. In the weeks that followed, changes began quietly. Not announcements, not public gestures. Small, deliberate decisions. Maria's schedule became more flexible without explanation. Resources she didn't know existed became available without her asking. Support arrived in ways that didn't expose her situation or take away her dignity. And for the first time in a long time, she wasn't doing everything alone. Daniel didn't present it as help. He didn't make it about generosity or recognition. He simply adjusted the system he controlled so that it worked for someone who needed it. And in doing that, he started to understand something he had missed his entire career. That leadership wasn't about staying above people. It was about recognizing when someone below the surface was holding more weight than anyone else could see. Months passed, and slowly, the balance Maria had been fighting to maintain became less fragile. The child's condition improved. Not overnight, not easily, but enough to bring something back into that small room that hadn't been there before. Relief. Not complete, not permanent, but real. Daniel visited once, quietly, without announcement. He didn't stay long. He didn't say much. But when he left, he carried something with him that no success, no deal, no achievement had ever given him. Perspective. And as Maria walked out of the building one evening, no longer at exactly 9:17, but at a time that no longer controlled her entire life, Daniel watched from a distance. Not out of curiosity, not out of control, but out of understanding. Sometimes, the people we overlook aren't just struggling. They're surviving something we were never meant to see. And sometimes, it takes breaking your own rules to finally understand what really matters. What would you have done if you were in his position? Would you have followed her? Or would you have walked away?